Today we're talking about counting in 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8 time signatures. This is LHS Band Room, and I'm Bob C. Let's begin with the review of time signatures. Here we have 4/4 time, which is the most common time signature in the world. Here we have 2/4 and 3/4, and then we have Igor Stravinsky just showing off. I mean, look at that, 3/16, 5/16, 3, what is that? But don't worry, today we're going to talk about 6/8 time, which is really not that difficult once you understand it. You could probably say this with me. In 4/4 time, there are 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. Same thing with 3/4, 3 beats per measure, quarter note gets the beat. But 6/8 is different. I mean, yes, it literally means there are 6 beats in a measure, and the 8th note gets the beat. And in slow tempos, like really slow tempos, that's exactly how you count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's how a band director or a choir director would conduct that, a slow 6/8 tempo in 6 individual beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I apologize for using the pen as a baton. My baton is at the school, and we can't get into the school right now. But that changes when you speed it up. I mean, sure, you could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really fast, and band directors could wave their arms around like they were being attacked by a swarm of bees, but there are better ways to convey that information. For faster tempos, 6/8 is counted in 2 beats of a dotted quarter note each instead of 6 beats of individual eighth notes. This is done by combining the first 3 eighth notes into one beat and the next 3 eighth notes into another beat. Melodies that are written in 6/8 often look like this, with notes beamed together in single beat units. Remember, beams across eighth notes like this usually mean that this is one beat. That's not always the case, but it is most of the time. Grouping eighth notes like this means that we can use 2 big beats instead of 6 small ones. This is great for conductors and the people who watch them. Instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can simply go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2. Much easier to watch, much easier on the conductor, and it makes sense. I sound like it's only the benefit of conductors, but this is a lot easier for players. Could you imagine tapping your foot 6 beats per measure at a fast tempo? Instead, you just tap 1, 2, 1, 2. A lot easier for everybody. This is also why so many marches are written in 6/8 time. When you're marching, you're either on your right foot or your left foot, either on beat 1 or beat 2. So the step with your left foot would be the first 3 eighth notes or a dotted quarter note or whatever the equivalent of 3 eighth notes is, and the right foot would be the next 3 eighth notes. This is where it gets a little confusing for students. 6/8 means 6 beats of eighth notes, right? But since we're grouping these together, we now have 2 big beats which consist of 3 eighth notes each instead of 6 beats of smaller individual eighth notes. Since there are 3 eighth notes, that means that each big beat, the beat you see and the beat you feel and the beat you tap your foot to, is a dotted quarter note. In fast 6/8 time, the dotted quarter note gets the beats. Each measure still has 6 eighth notes. They just are grouped together so the music can move more consistently and in the 6/8 feel. The time signature still applies because you've got 6 eighth notes in a measure. They're just grouped together in groups of 3. In slow tempos, you want to count 6/8 time with a number for each eighth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But even there's a natural accent that happens on beats 1 and 4. In fast tempos, we don't count 6 beats, we count 2. Each beat is a dotted quarter note, which you subdivide into 3 eighth notes each, for a total of 6 eighth notes in the measure. In slow 6/8, a pattern like this would be 1, 3, 4, 6, 1, 3, 4, 6. It has that lilting feeling of a 6/8, but it's slow enough that I would count this with eighth notes individually. But in fast tempos, we don't count the 6 eighth notes anymore. Instead, we count the 2 large dotted quarter note beats. You have to subdivide the dotted quarter notes. This rhythm would go 1, li, 2, li. We'll get more into the syllables that you use when subdividing 6/8 time in a moment. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, wait a minute. 3/4 time signatures also have 6 eighth notes in every measure. Why don't we just count it like 3/4? Good question, my young waltzing friend. 6/8 doesn't feel like 3/4, especially in fast tempos, but it doesn't even work in slow tempos either, and here's why. In 3/4, there are 3 distinct beats per measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. There's a very slight accent that naturally occurs on each of those 3 beats. In 6/8, when you're going slow, the music feels like there are only 2 beats. When you're going fast, it even feels like that more so. The natural accent falls on the 1st and the 4th eighth notes. 6/8 feels like it's in 2. It feels like a duple meter. 3/4 feels like a triple meter. Just listen to the difference. So to show the difference between 6/8 and 3/4, even though both types have 6/8 notes in the measure, I'm going to play an old song called House of the Rising Sun. The first time I play it, I'm going to do it in 6/8 as it should be done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can just hear it. Okay, now here comes the vocal. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. Okay, and that's the 6/8 version. Now, I'm going to play it in 3/4, and even though it's the same number of eighth notes, it still feels completely different. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. And right away you can just tell it's a difference in a 3 feel versus a 2 feel, 6/8 versus 3/4. The syllables that we use when counting fast 6/8 are 1 la li, 2 la li. Let's just practice that. 1 la li, 2 la li, 1 la li, 2 la li. Again, we're subdividing a dotted quarter note. 1 la li, 2 la li. If we tie the first 2 eighth notes together to make 1 quarter note, then we put the la in parentheses because we're holding through that, then the rhythm becomes 1 li 2 li, 1 li 2 li. Practice that a few times. 1 li 2 li, 1 li 2 li. And of course we can reverse that, start with the eighth note and then go to the longer quarter note. 1 la, 2 la. Notice that the li syllable is in parentheses because we're holding through that and we don't want to cut it short. We may put a rest in there to make the first note shorter. 1, li 2, li 1, li 2. You'll see this a lot. Remember the la is in parentheses because we don't want to hit that note. Counting 16th notes in 6/8 time can be a real mouthful. 1 ta la ta li ta, 2 ta la ta li ta. But if you look at it, the 1 and the 2 are the dotted quarter notes. You have 1 la li, so the number la and li are the 3 eighth notes that make that up. And then the ta syllable keeps coming back as the second half of each eighth note. 1 ta la ta li ta. 1 ta la ta li ta. 2 ta la ta li ta. Of course, everything that applies to notes also applies to rests. A dotted quarter rest in fast 6/8 time gets 1 big beat. An eighth rest still gets 1/3 of that quarter note beat because a dotted quarter note equals 3 eighth notes. A 16th rest is still 1/2 of an eighth note. It's all the same. Once you understand 6/8 and how that works, then time signatures like 9/8 and 12/8 make a lot more sense, and they're frankly pretty easy to use. 9/8 is simply one more dotted quarter note. It's used a lot for jazz waltzes. 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li, 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li. 12/8 is used to create a swing feel. 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li, 4 la li, 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li, 4 la li. 9/8 simply adds one more dotted quarter note. 12/8 has 4 dotted quarter notes for a total of 12 eighth notes. That would be 24 16th notes in a measure, which can look pretty crazy. So I hope that clears up any confusion that you may have had about these 6/8, 9/8, 12/8 time signatures. There's a lot of good music written in these time signatures, and I hope that you enjoy playing it. Good night.